Now, here's a cautionary tale about letting children play with your phone. A 6-year-old in Michigan in the US has managed to order more than £800 worth of takeaway food from his dad's phone. Mason Stonehouse fancied a snack while playing. Multiple orders later, and the Stonehouse family was inundated with pizzas, sandwiches and so much more. Here's Karen Morrison.
This is a 6-year-old with a very big appetite for spending.
I'm starving as well, actually. OK, now a 30-year-old Portuguese dog has been named as the world's oldest ever. Bobby is a purebred Rafeiro do Alentejo. I think I got that wrong. A breed that has an average life expectancy of 12 to 14 years. Now, his owners say the secret to his longevity is the calm, peaceful environment he lives in. Just like this office. Jane Hill is coming up at the top of the hour. Now, though, time for the weather, and it's Thomas. Hello, mate.
Hi there, Clive. Well, you know, the weekend's upon us, and...
This is BBC News. I'm Jane Hill. The headlines at 5. Lancashire police have said they believe mother of 2, Nicola Bulley, fell into the River Wyre, and there are no suspicious circumstances.
Our main working hypothesis, therefore, is that Nicola has sadly fallen into the river, that there is no third party or criminal involvement, and that this is not suspicious.
The victims have lived through the worst times, say representatives at the public inquiry into the contaminated blood scandal of the 1970s and 80s. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has postponed a much-anticipated trip to Beijing after a Chinese surveillance balloon was spotted above Montana. The government has abandoned plans to house asylum seekers in a Pontins holiday park on Merseyside. And a warm welcome in South Sudan for Pope Francis as he continues what's described as a pilgrimage for peace in Africa. Hello, good evening. Welcome to BBC News. Lancashire police have said this afternoon that they believe Nicola Bulley, who went missing while walking her dog, probably fell into the River Wyre. The mother of 2, who's 45, was last seen a week ago in St Michael's-on-Wyre. Air and underwater drones, helicopters, police divers and dogs have all been used in the search for her. Let's go live to the scene. Our reporter Rowan Bridge has been following this story throughout more than a week since her family have seen her. Rowan, a desperate story. Explain more about what the police are saying.
Can be really distressing for the family and for Nicola's children.
Well, that was Superintendent Sally Riley there from the Lancashire Force giving that update to journalists just in the last few hours. And let's assess perhaps how the police have reached these conclusions and the work that has been done to find the missing woman, mother of 2 young children, of course. I'm joined by Bob Eastwood, who is a former Lancashire Police Chief Superintendent. Thanks so much for your time here this evening. You know the patch well, obviously. You worked there for a long time. First of all, just your thoughts on the search that we've seen and how the police this afternoon have reached that very sad hypothesis.
Well, it is.
Bob Eastwood, we're really grateful for your time. Thanks very much for joining us here tonight. Thank you. Former Lancashire Police Chief Superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you.
The long-running public inquiry into the contaminated blood scandal of the 1970s and 80s has been hearing its closing statements. It's now believed that about 30,000 people were infected with HIV or hepatitis C after receiving blood transfusions or taking a drug imported from the US to control haemophilia. The inquiry has taken evidence from 370 witnesses. Its recommendations are expected later this year. Our health reporter Jim Reid told us more.
We just had the actual file.
That's our health reporter Jim Reid. We've also been hearing from the campaigner Joseph Petey, who was at the inquiry. He's a haemophiliac who found out he'd been infected with hepatitis C and HIV via contaminated blood when he was 17 years old.
Just heard the last of the some of the issues, so substantial compensation. I think Sir Brian has the opportunity, if not to say that there should be criminal prosecutions, then to at least point the way to the way that they should be dealt with.
Joseph Petey, who had been at the inquiry. The time now 14 minutes past 5. These are tonight's headlines. Lancashire police have said they believe the mother of two, Nicola Bulley, fell into the River Wyre, and there are no suspicious circumstances surrounding her disappearance. The victims have lived through the worst times, say representatives at the public inquiry into the contaminated blood scandal of the 1970s and 80s. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has postponed a much-anticipated trip to Beijing after a Chinese surveillance balloon was detected above Montana. The government has abandoned plans to house asylum seekers in a holiday park on Merseyside. Sefton Council, which is run by Labour, and the Conservative MP for Southport, Damien Moore, had opposed the use of the Pontins site in Ainsdale. The Home Office said it wouldn't be commenting on any individual site. Well, let's get the thoughts of the Labour MP for Kingston upon Hull North, I should say, Diana Johnson. Crucially, Diana Johnson is the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee. Hello, very good evening to you. So what do you make of this, this change of heart, as it appears?
Well, good evening.
And this proposal, suggestion had been opposed, as we said at the outset, by people on both sides of the political divide. So there was a lot of local concern. What are the rules here? How much say can a local council, a local community have when central government proposes something like this?
Well, you're absolutely right.
But do you feel local communities should have more say somehow? They should be allowed to put their voice forward, as it were?
Well, of course, I want local councils.
All right. Diana Johnson, many thanks for your time tonight. Thank you. Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee. A man who was caught in the grounds of Windsor Castle with a loaded crossbow has pleaded guilty to treason. Jaswant Singh Chahal was arrested on Christmas Day 2021 after telling a royal protection officer that he was there to kill the Queen. Our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford was at the Old Bailey.
Jaswant Singh Chahal appeared by...
Daniel Sanford at the Old Bailey. China says a balloon which was spotted over the US is a Chinese civilian airship which had deviated from its planned route. US defence officials say they believe the balloon, which has been seen above sensitive areas in the last few days, was a high-altitude surveillance device. But China's foreign ministry said it was used mainly for meteorological purposes and that it regretted any unintended entry of the balloon into US airspace. It added that China would continue communicating with the US. Well, America's Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has postponed his visit to Beijing, which was due to begin shortly. Our China correspondent Stephen McDonnell told us the latest from Beijing.
So it's been quite a...
Well, Stephen McDonnell there in Beijing. Let's indeed talk to our North America correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue. So it's there for meteorological purposes. Gary, what are they saying about that where you are?
The Americans are not having a bit of that.
We wait to see. Thanks so much for now. Thank you. Gary O'Donoghue there in Washington, D.C., of course. Senior officials from the European Union have said Ukraine's future is inside the EU, as President Zelensky has been hosting a summit in Kyiv. There was no mention of a timeline, but the EU says it will support Ukraine and its people against what it called Russia's ongoing war of aggression for as long as it takes. President Zelensky has been holding a news conference with EU leaders He's also been speaking about the conflict. President Zelensky and Ursula von der Leyen. Well, our correspondent in Kyiv, James Waterhouse, analysed the significance of that summit. James Waterhouse in Ukraine. The FTSE 100 stock index has closed at a record high, partly because of a drop in the pound against the dollar. The stock market closed at 7,901, more than 1% higher. The previous closing high was 7,877. Let's pause, take a look at the weather prospects right now. Here's Thomas Schaffenacker.
Hello. Well, the weekend is here and you might be...
Hello, you're watching BBC News. I'm Jane Hill. These are the latest headlines. Lancashire police have said they believe the mother of two, Nicola Bulley, fell into the River Wyre and there are no suspicious circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Victims have lived through the worst times, say representatives at a public inquiry into the contaminated blood scandal of the 1970s and 80s. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has postponed a much-anticipated trip to Beijing after a Chinese surveillance balloon was seen above Montana. There's been a warm welcome in South Sudan for Pope Francis as he continues what's described as a pilgrimage for peace in Africa. Much more coming up in this half hour. We'll talk a little bit more about some of those stories. But right now, we will find out what's happening in the world of sport. Hi, Becky. Evening.
Hi, good evening, Jane. And we're going to start with the news that UK Athletics is calling for a change in legislation to play this evening at 8. And that is all the sport for now. Chetan will be back in an hour with Sports Day. But that's it for now, Jane.
Thanks, Becky. Thanks very much. Well, up to 40 countries could boycott the next Olympic Games in protest at Russian and Belarusian participation, making the whole event pointless. That's according to Poland's Sport and Tourism Minister. His comments come after Poland, Lithuania, Estonia and Latvia jointly rejected an IOC plan, International Olympic Committee plan, to allow Russians and Belarusians to compete in 2024. The IOC says a boycott would only punish athletes. It plans to allow Russia and its ally to compete under a neutral flag. In an interview with the BBC, Poland's sports minister Kamil Bortniczuk said it is important that Western countries stay united in their boycott of Russia. Poland's sport and tourism minister talking about the Olympics in 2024. Officials in the northeast of India say they've arrested more than 1,800 people on charges of marrying or arranging marriages to underage girls. The minimum age of marriage for women in India is 18, but that law is often flouted. The United Nations estimates that India is home to the largest number of child brides in the world, with nearly 1.5 million underage girls getting married every year. Let's discuss this with our South Asia regional editor, Ambarasan Etirajan. Good to see you. But that number is still staggering, that figure of 1.5 million. Give us the context. How big a problem is that? Is this number changing at all?
It is a huge problem, especially in small towns and rural areas, where many families, they go low-income group families, because of poverty, because of social issues, compulsion, they go through this, marrying the daughters before the age of 18. If you look at states like Uttar Pradesh in central India or Madhya Pradesh, what happens if you have 2 or 3 daughters at home? The primary aim of the parents would be to get them married at the earliest. It's not about getting them jobs immediately or sending them to education. We have had a number of cases where the girls will call the teachers, probably 15, 16-year-old, I want to complete my A-level studies, I want to go to university, but my parents are now forcing me to get married. But from a societal point of view, they want to get them married because they don't want the daughters to go with somebody else or marry outside the caste. Also, the more they keep them for them, it is an economical issue. because you have to pay dowry, you have to give them gifts. So there's various factors here. For example, during COVID, when millions of people lost their jobs, like migrant laborers, when they started going back to the home hundreds of kilometers away, you were stuck for 2 years, and then you have your daughters at home. So they don't want, don't want to face any social issues, so they get them married. But I have to say, this is very unusual for a state to carry out such a massive crackdown, like in the state of Assam, what's happening now, and take action.
So why is it this one specific state that is doing this?
Various governments have been doing actions like arresting individual cases and also carrying out various campaigns. And I have to stress that in the 1960s and 70s, 2/3 of the women probably would get married under the age of 18. Now the numbers have come down to 25 thanks to the law. Very strong laws are there, and also campaigns both by the government and by the non-governmental organizations. Now, somebody would raise questions, a majority of these areas where the raids are being conducted are Muslim dominated, and there's a Hindu nationalist government, and there were concerns, but the chief minister of the state very categorically said, we have arrested both priests from the Hindu community and Muslim clerics because most of the marriages are religious functions. The registrations will be done much later. So these are very important because they solemnize the weddings. So it is cutting across various religious communities, Hindus, Muslim, Christians, and indigenous communities. We want to bring an end to this because what he described as an unpardonable crime against women, it causes many health issues for women. You get married before the age of 18, you get pregnant, the maternal mortality rate, infant mortality rate, and the health complications, and then the psychological trauma. By the age of 21, you have 2 or 3 kids, then you are not able to do anything. So the chief minister of the state wants that people should be aware of that. Now we are going to enforce the law properly, even though these laws have been there for years.
Yes.
Enforcing is a problem. And India is a huge country. It's impossible for the government to go and monitor every single house. And they have been proactive. The governments in various state governments have been proactive. But this one is sending out a clear message to the societies. No, this cannot be done. This cannot carry on.
That's really interesting, and the numbers are coming down from a, as you said at the beginning. I mean, is there that's the Assam's example. Is there a drive, a move, a willingness to keep driving that number further down for other states, perhaps to follow Assam's lead?
One of the the best examples would be giving them education and awareness. So if these women get jobs, it improves their economic condition. So especially families in industrialized states like in Karnataka or in Tamil Nadu or in Kerala with a very high literacy rate, people do not do that. The numbers are very less, I would say. So what is important here is awareness. 2, education to the families. That is where the school teachers play a major role. They keep telling these children, like in case if your parents are forcing you, please tell us, because that cannot happen. On many occasions, the school teachers, they go and talk with their parents, allow her to finish her A-level, let her study or go to a factory and work, they can be economically independent. So the main worry is about, how do I get my daughter married? If you ask any Indian family, the first priority would be if you have daughters, get them married. That is, marriage is the most important thing in a family. So that is why awareness and education, where the activists point out, are the key to bring the numbers down.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for now. Thank you, Ambarasan Ethirajan. Thank you so much, our South Asia regional editor. Here, the energy regulator Ofgem has called on companies to suspend the forced installation of prepayment meters for customers who are in arrears with their bills. And the association representing the firms has said the meters should never be put into vulnerable households. It comes after an undercover investigation by The Times saw debt agents breaking into homes to fit meters. Here's our business correspondent Emma Simpson.
Hello, British Gas News.
Just a reminder now of tonight's headlines. Lancashire police have said they believe the mother of 2, Nicola Bulley, fell into the River Wyre and there are no suspicious circumstances surrounding her disappearance. The victims have lived through the worst times, say representatives at the public inquiry into the contaminated blood scandal of the 1970s and 80s. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has postponed a much-anticipated trip to Beijing after a Chinese surveillance balloon was detected above Montana. Large crowds have welcomed Pope Francis on his arrival in South Sudan at the start of what the Vatican is calling a pilgrimage of peace. The Pope was joined at the airport in Juba by the leaders of the Church of England and Church of Scotland. Together on this historic visit, they're trying to promote reconciliation in a largely Christian country that has been ravaged by tribal conflict since it became independent 12 years ago. Pope Francis is honouring a promise in 2019 to visit South Sudan, when in a dramatic gesture he kissed the feet of the country's rival leaders at the Vatican. Well, Mercy Juma is our correspondent in the capital, Juba.
The people of South Sudan and the leadership ease things down.
Mercy Juma there, our correspondent. The fashion designer Paco Rabanne has died at the age of 88. He was best known for his 1960s work, which included metallic ensembles and space-age designs. His death was confirmed by Puig, the parent company of his brands, which said he had marked generations with his radical vision of fashion. And they said his legacy will live on. Now, they are known as Hull's headscarf revolutionaries. Today, people have been on a walk to raise money to honour them. Campaigners want a statue built in honour of the group of women who fought for and secured safety improvements on fishing vessels after 3 Hull trawlers were lost in a matter of weeks in 1968. Joe Makel has the story.
On the dock,
The carbon footprint of football is huge, but the game has a new plan to tackle it. Tomorrow, the first ever Green Football Weekend will spotlight climate change at fixtures across the country, with clubs, players and fans all taking part, as Nesta McGregor explains.
Port Vale might play their actual news.
Now, let's face it, here's the story that everyone's been talking about today, a cautionary tale about letting children play with your phone. A 6-year-old in Michigan in the US managed to order more than £800 worth of takeaway food from his dad's mobile. Mason Stonehouse fancied a snack while he was playing. Multiple orders later, and the Stonehouse family was inundated with pizza, sandwiches and so much more. Karen Morrison explains.
This is a 6-year-old with a very big app of your phone too. Karen Morrison, BBC News.
Brilliant, isn't it? Absolutely brilliant. Well, not if you have to pay the bill, obviously. Let's take a look at the weather prospects, shall we? Here's Thomas Schaffernacker.